You think you're free, don't you? You can choose your career, your lifestyle, your identity, your beliefs. You can swipe left or right, buy or not buy, post or scroll past. You live in a democracy where you vote for your leaders, speak your mind, love who you want. But what if I told you that this very sense of freedom is the most sophisticated form of control ever devised? What if your choices are not liberating you, but imprisoning you more completely than any chain or cage ever could? Slavoj Žižek, the wild-haired provocateur who sees ideology where others see only personal preference, has spent decades revealing a truth so disturbing that most people can't bear to acknowledge it. Your freedom is an illusion, and the more free you feel, the more perfectly enslaved you actually are. You're not choosing, you're obeying. And the most terrifying part? You love your obedience. Žižek understood something that demolishes our most cherished beliefs about modern life. Choice is not freedom. Choice is the mechanism by which freedom is destroyed. When you wake up every morning and decide what to wear, what to eat, what to watch, what to buy, you experience this as pure liberty. But Žižek sees something else. You are performing a script written by forces you don't understand, making choices that have been pre-selected for you by systems of power that benefit from your sense of agency. Consider the last major decision you made. Where did the parameters of that choice come from? Who decided what your options were? When you chose your career, you selected from a list of socially acceptable professions. When you chose your lifestyle, you picked from a catalog of pre-approved identities. When you chose your political beliefs, you sorted yourself into existing categories that serve existing power structures. This is what Žižek calls pseudo-choice, the illusion of freedom that actually eliminates genuine alternatives. You can choose between Coke and Pepsi, but you can't choose a world without corporate beverage monopolies. You can choose between Democratic and Republican candidates, but you can't choose a political system that isn't dominated by capital. You can choose your gender identity, but you can't choose to live outside the economic system that commodifies identity itself. The genius of modern ideology is that it doesn't prohibit choice. It proliferates meaningless choices while eliminating meaningful ones. You have infinite options for personal customization, but zero options for systemic transformation. You can be anything you want to be, as long as what you want has been predetermined by market research. This proliferation of pseudo-choices serves a crucial psychological function. It makes you complicit in your own domination. When you choose your exploitation, you can't blame external oppression. When your cage has 1,000 different colored bars, and you get to pick which color you prefer, you forget that you're still in a cage. Traditional authority told you what you couldn't do. Modern authority tells you what you must enjoy. Žižek reveals that the superego of late capitalism doesn't function through prohibition, but through command. Specifically, the command to enjoy, to choose, to be free, to optimize your experience of life. This creates a new form of tyranny, the tyranny of mandatory happiness. You're not just allowed to pursue your desires, you're required to. You must find your passion, live your truth, follow your bliss, maximize your potential. The system doesn't forbid pleasure, it makes pleasure into a duty. And when pleasure becomes mandatory, it ceases to be pleasurable. When freedom becomes an obligation, it becomes a new form of bondage. Look at how this operates in every sphere of life. At work, you're not just supposed to complete tasks. You're supposed to be passionate about your career, find meaning in your labor, express your authentic self through your professional identity. In relationships, you're not just supposed to be faithful. You're supposed to be constantly growing, communicating, optimizing your partnership for maximum fulfillment. This command to enjoy creates what Žižek calls superego anxiety. The anxiety that you're not enjoying your life enough, not making the most of your freedom, not living up to your potential for happiness. You feel guilty not for transgressing, but for not transgressing enough. You worry not that you're too hedonistic, but that you're not hedonistic enough. The result is a population of people who are simultaneously more free than any humans in history and more anxious about their freedom. You have more choices than ever before, but choice itself has become a burden rather than a liberation. Every option you don't choose becomes a source of regret. Every path you don't take haunts you with its possibilities. Every ideology, Žižek argues, has an obscene underside, unofficial practices that contradict the official values but actually make the system function. The obscene underside of the ideology of freedom is the vast apparatus of manipulation, surveillance, and control that operates beneath the surface of democratic choice. While the official ideology tells you that you're free to choose, the unofficial reality is that your choices are being predicted, shaped, and monetized by algorithmic systems that know you better than you know yourself. You think you're browsing the internet freely, but recommendation algorithms are curating your reality. You think you're choosing what to buy, but behavioral economists have designed your purchasing environment to trigger specific responses. This obscene underside doesn't contradict the ideology of freedom, it enables it. You can only feel free to choose because sophisticated systems of control have limited your choices to options that serve power. The more controlled you actually are, the more free you feel. Because control has become invisible, internalized, algorithmic. Social media platforms perfectly exemplify this dynamic. You experience scrolling through your feed as pure freedom. You can like what you want, share what you want, follow whom you want. But every gesture you make feeds data into systems designed to predict and manipulate your future behavior. Your freedom to choose is precisely what makes you predictable and controllable. The most perverse aspect of this system is that it requires your active participation. You're not passively controlled. You actively contribute to your own manipulation. Every click, every like, every share gives the system more information about how to control you better. You are simultaneously the user and the product, the chooser and the chosen. Žižek identifies a paradox at the heart of liberal democracy. The more tolerant a society becomes, the more violent it actually is. This isn't physical violence, but what he calls systemic violence. The violence built into the normal functioning of economic and political systems that present themselves as peaceful and free. Liberal tolerance allows you to believe whatever you want, practice any lifestyle, express any identity, as long as you don't threaten the fundamental structures of power that make this tolerance possible. You can be gay, but not anti-capitalist. You can be feminist, but not revolutionary. You can be spiritual, but not politically disruptive. The system absorbs all forms of difference that don't challenge its essential logic. This creates what Herbert Marcuse called repressive tolerance. Tolerance that functions as a form of control by channeling dissent into harmless expressions of difference. Your rebellion becomes a lifestyle choice. Your resistance becomes a consumer preference. Your revolution becomes a personal brand. The violence of this system isn't that it prohibits certain thoughts or behaviors. It's that it makes certain thoughts and behaviors literally unthinkable. You can imagine being any kind of person you want, but you can't imagine a world organized according to different principles. You have infinite freedom of choice within the system, but zero freedom to choose a different system. This is why Žižek argues that true freedom would initially feel like violence. It would require breaking through the comfortable prison of pseudo-choice into the terrifying uncertainty of genuine alternatives. Most people prefer the familiar cage of managed freedom to the unknown territory of actual liberation. Democracy, in Žižek's analysis, functions as a fetish in the psychoanalytic sense, a belief that allows you to disavow what you know to be true. You know that your vote doesn't actually determine policy, that elected officials serve corporate interests, that the system is rigged in favor of wealth. But you vote anyway because the act of voting allows you to maintain the illusion that you live in a free society. This is the fetishistic logic. I know very well that democracy is largely theatrical, but nonetheless I act as if my participation makes a difference. The vote becomes a ritual that absolves you of the responsibility to engage in more meaningful forms of political action. You've done your civic duty by choosing between pre-selected options. What more could be asked of you? The genius of this system is that it makes you complicit in your own powerlessness. When the candidate you voted for betrays their promises, you don't blame the system. You blame yourself for choosing poorly or blame other voters for choosing differently. The failure of democracy is always attributed to human weakness rather than structural dysfunction. This fetishistic relationship to democracy extends to every area of life where you're offered meaningless choices as compensation for real powerlessness. You can choose your health insurance plan, but not whether healthcare should be a human right. You can choose your educational path, but not whether education should be free. You can choose your employment, but not whether work should be meaningful. Žižek identifies a particular form of consciousness that dominates contemporary life: postmodern cynicism. This isn't the cynicism of the powerless, but the cynicism of the powerful. The awareness that everything is constructed, nothing is authentic, all values are relative. But the decision to participate anyway because there's no alternative. You know that advertising manipulates you, but you buy the products anyway. You know that politicians lie, but you vote anyway. You know that social media is toxic, but you scroll anyway. You know that your job is meaningless, but you work anyway. This isn't naive belief. It's sophisticated disbelief that functions perfectly to maintain the system. This cynical consciousness allows the system to operate more efficiently than any form of true belief ever could. Traditional ideology required genuine conviction. Postmodern ideology only requires cynical participation. You don't need to believe in capitalism. You just need to act as if you do. You don't need to believe in democracy. You just need to perform democratic citizenship. The most insidious aspect of this cynicism is that it inoculates you against genuine alternatives. When you know that everything is equally constructed and manipulated, you lose the ability to distinguish between different forms of construction. All politics becomes equally suspect, all values equally arbitrary, all choices equally meaningless. This creates what Žižek calls cynical distance, the psychological space that allows you to participate in systems you don't believe in while maintaining your sense of superior awareness. You're too smart to be fooled, but not smart enough to refuse participation. Your very sophistication becomes a form of naivety. Climate change represents the ultimate revelation of freedom's falsity. You are told that you have the freedom to consume whatever you want, travel wherever you want, live however you want. But the cumulative effect of everyone exercising this freedom is planetary destruction. Your individual liberty aggregates into collective suicide. This is where the ideology of choice reveals its most murderous logic. The system requires you to make choices that you know are destroying the conditions for human survival, while telling you that making different choices is impossible because it would violate your freedom. You're free to buy whatever you want, but you're not free to live in a society that doesn't organize itself around consumption. The response to ecological crisis perfectly illustrates the limits of choice-based solutions. You're offered green alternatives that allow you to feel virtuous while changing nothing fundamental. You can choose electric cars, but not public transportation. You can choose renewable energy, but not an economy that doesn't require endless growth. You can choose organic food, but not agricultural systems that work with, rather than against, natural cycles. These pseudo-choices serve a crucial ideological function. They maintain the illusion that environmental problems can be solved through better consumer choices rather than systemic transformation. They allow you to feel responsible and empowered while remaining powerless to address the actual causes of ecological destruction. Digital technology has perfected the art of creating obedience through apparent freedom. Your smartphone gives you access to infinite information, unlimited communication, endless entertainment, while simultaneously tracking your every movement, predicting your every choice, and shaping your every thought through algorithmic manipulation. You experience using digital platforms as pure agency. You decide what to search for, what to read, whom to follow, what to share. But every gesture you make is captured, analyzed, and fed back into systems designed to influence your future behavior. You're free to choose, but your choices are being shaped by forces you can't see or understand. The most sophisticated aspect of digital control is that it works through your active participation rather than passive consumption. Social media doesn't broadcast propaganda to you. It harvests content from you and curates it back to you in forms designed to maximize engagement. You become simultaneously the producer and consumer of your own manipulation. This creates what Žižek calls algorithmic obedience, following commands that never feel like commands because they appear to emerge from your own freely expressed preferences. The algorithm doesn't tell you what to think. It shows you what people like you are thinking, creating the illusion that you're choosing while actually conforming to statistically predictable patterns. Perhaps the most complete expression of contemporary pseudo-freedom is the ideology of the entrepreneurial self, the idea that you are a business that must constantly optimize its performance in competitive markets. You don't just have a life, you manage a personal brand. You don't just work, you develop your human capital. You don't just exist, you optimize your existence for maximum value creation. This ideology transforms every aspect of life into a form of labor. Your relationships become networking. Your hobbies become side hustles. Your experiences become content. Your personality becomes a product to be marketed. You are simultaneously the worker, the manager, and the commodity in your own personal economy. The genius of this system is that it eliminates the traditional boundary between exploitation and freedom. You're not exploited by external forces. You exploit yourself more ruthlessly than any boss ever could. You work longer hours, accept worse conditions, and demand less security than previous generations because you believe you're building your own empire rather than serving someone else's. This internalization of market logic creates what Žižek calls self-exploitation with a human face. You burn yourself out pursuing entrepreneurial dreams that serve existing power structures while feeling like you're expressing your authentic self. Your very individuality becomes a form of conformity to economic imperatives. In psychoanalytic terms, Genuine freedom isn't achieved by fulfilling your desires, but by understanding how your desires are constructed and choosing to relate to them differently. Žižek calls this traversing the fundamental fantasy, the moment when you stop being driven by unconscious compulsions and start making conscious choices about how to live. Applied to the ideology of freedom, this means recognizing that your sense of choice is largely illusory and your desires are largely manufactured, but then choosing how to respond to this recognition. Instead of cynically accepting the meaninglessness of all choices, you can begin to make distinctions between choices that serve your authentic development and choices that serve systems of power. This doesn't mean becoming a pure rational actor who makes perfect choices. It means becoming conscious of the forces that shape your choosing and taking responsibility for how you respond to those forces. You can't escape ideology completely, but you can develop what Žižek calls ideological awareness, the ability to see how ideology operates and choose how to relate to it. Traversing the fantasy of freedom means giving up the comforting illusion that you're already free and accepting the uncomfortable reality that freedom is something you must create through conscious action. It means recognizing that most of what you experience as choice is actually conformity, and that genuine choice is much rarer and more difficult than you imagined. So here's the truth that Žižek spends his career articulating through clouds of cigarette smoke and cascades of cultural references. Your freedom is a cage designed to feel like liberty. Every choice you make reinforces the system that limits your choices. Every expression of individuality serves the machinery of conformity. Every act of consumption masquerades as an act of rebellion. But recognizing this isn't cause for despair. It's the beginning of authentic freedom. When you stop mistaking pseudo-choice for real choice, you become available for genuine alternatives. When you stop confusing consumption with creation, you can begin actually creating. When you stop accepting the terms of existing debates, you can start asking different questions. Real freedom doesn't mean having more options within the existing system. It means having the courage to imagine and work toward different systems entirely. It doesn't mean choosing better from the available menu. It means questioning who wrote the menu and why those are the only options. This kind of freedom is genuinely terrifying because it offers no guarantees, no comfortable certainties, no pre-approved paths to follow. It requires you to take responsibility not just for your personal choices, but for the collective choices that shape the world you live in. It demands that you stop being a consumer of prepackaged experiences and start being a creator of new possibilities. Žižek's ultimate insight is that authentic freedom requires what he calls the authentic act, action that breaks with existing coordinates of possibility and creates something genuinely new. This isn't rebellion within the system, but rebellion against the system's basic logic. It's not choosing differently, but choosing to change the terms of choice itself. The revolutionary moment isn't when you make better choices. It's when you stop accepting that the current range of choices represents the limit of what's possible. It's when you refuse to participate in the theater of pseudo-freedom and start working to create conditions for genuine liberation. This doesn't mean withdrawing from society or refusing all forms of participation. It means participating consciously rather than unconsciously, strategically rather than compulsively, creatively rather than consumptively. It means recognizing that your individual freedom is inseparable from collective freedom, and that both require forms of organization and action that transcend personal lifestyle choices. Žižek offers no easy path to this authentic freedom, no simple techniques for escaping ideological control. He offers only the disturbing recognition that everything you think you know about your own liberty might be wrong. and the possibility that acknowledging this wrongness might be the beginning of genuine emancipation. The choice, the real choice, is yours. Remain comfortable in your beautiful prison of pseudo-freedom, or risk the uncertainty of authentic liberation. Your future, and the future of human possibility itself, hangs in the balance. Stop choosing. Start deciding. The difference might just save the world. Tentar novamente ou Claude pode cometer erros. Confira sempre as respostas.